Video 04, How Elizabeth Holmes Fooled the Medical Industry. How Elizabeth Holmes fooled the medical industry. She promised she could detect cancer, diabetes, and hundreds of other diseases from a single drop of blood. She raised $700 million from some of the most powerful people in the world. She was on the cover of every major magazine, called The Next Steve Jobs, and built a company valued at $9 billion. There was just one problem. The technology never worked. Not once. Her name was Elizabeth Holmes. Her company was Theranos. And this is the story of the biggest fraud in Silicon Valley history. Elizabeth Holmes grew up in Washington, D.C., the daughter of a government official and a congressional committee staffer. She was driven, ambitious, and obsessed with the idea of changing the world. In 2002, at the age of 18, she enrolled at Stanford University to study chemical engineering. But she did not stay long. During her sophomore year, Holmes came up with an idea that she believed would revolutionize healthcare, a device that could run hundreds of blood tests from just a tiny finger prick, no needles, no large vials, no expensive lab equipment. She dropped out of Stanford in 2003 and founded a company she initially called Real-Time Cures, later renamed Theranos, a combination of therapy and diagnosis. She was 19 years old. Holmes immediately began recruiting heavy hitters. Her board of directors eventually included George Shultz, the former Secretary of State, Henry Kissinger, retired generals James Mattis and William Perry, and media mogul Rupert Murdoch. These were not tech experts. They were power brokers, and their names gave Theranos instant credibility. The pitch was irresistible. Imagine walking into a Walgreens, pricking your finger, and within minutes getting a complete blood panel at a fraction of the cost of traditional lab work. No more needles, no more waiting, no more expensive hospital visits. Holmes said Theranos could do all of this with its proprietary device called the Edison. Investors poured money in. Over the next decade, Theranos raised more than $700 million from investors, including Larry Ellison, the Walton family, Betsy DeVos, and Rupert Murdoch. At its peak, the company was valued at $9 billion, making Elizabeth Holmes the youngest self-made female billionaire in the world. The problem was that the Edison did not work, and Elizabeth Holmes knew it. The device was supposed to run hundreds of tests from a tiny blood sample using proprietary technology. In reality, it could only perform a small number of tests with any accuracy, and even those results were unreliable. Blood samples were too small. Machines overheated. Results varied wildly from test to test. So what did Theranos do? They cheated. When the Edison could not produce reliable results, Theranos secretly ran patient samples on commercially available machines made by Siemens and other manufacturers. The same machines you would find in any hospital lab. They diluted the tiny finger prick samples to have enough volume to run on these standard machines, which compromised accuracy even further. Patients were getting test results that were often wildly inaccurate. Some patients were told they had conditions they did not have. Others were told they were healthy when they were not. These were real people making real medical decisions based on fake results. Holmes maintained the illusion through obsessive secrecy. Employees were siloed into small groups, forbidden from talking to other teams. Non-disclosure agreements were extreme. Anyone who raised concerns was threatened with lawsuits or fired. The culture was built on fear and control. And then there was Holmes herself. She crafted an image with surgical precision, the black turtleneck, an homage to Steve Jobs. The deep baritone voice, which multiple former colleagues say was fake. The intense, unblinking stare. Everything was designed to project confidence and genius. The first cracks appeared from inside the company. Tyler Shultz, the grandson of board member George Shultz, had joined Theranos as an entry-level employee. What he saw shocked him. Test results were being manipulated. Quality controls were being ignored. And when he raised concerns, he was told to keep quiet. Schultz went to his grandfather first. George Schultz, fiercely loyal to Holmes, did not believe him. So Tyler went to the authorities and to the press. Another whistleblower, Erica Chung, a lab associate, independently reported concerns to regulators about the accuracy of Theranos testing. Both she and Tyler Schultz faced intense legal pressure from Theranos, which hired private investigators and high-powered lawyers to silence them. Then came the journalist who would bring the entire house down. John Carreyrou, a reporter at the Wall Street Journal, began investigating Theranos in 2015 after receiving tips from former employees. Holmes and Theranos fought back hard. They hired David Boies, one of the most powerful attorneys in the country, to try to stop the story. But Carreyrou published anyway. In October 2015, the Wall Street Journal ran a front-page article revealing that Theranos was using commercially available machines for most of its tests, and that the Edison produced inaccurate results. The article sent shockwaves through Silicon Valley and Wall Street. Holmes went on the defensive. She appeared on CNBC on Jim Cramer's show at conferences, insisting that Carreyrou was wrong and that the technology worked. She called it a hit piece, but the evidence was overwhelming. In January 2016, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, known as CMS, inspected the Theranos lab in Newark, California. What they found was devastating. The lab posed immediate jeopardy to patient health and safety. Theranos was banned from operating its lab for 2 years. The company began voiding tens of thousands of test results, admitting they were unreliable. Walgreens, which had opened Theranos testing centers in dozens of stores, ended their partnership and eventually sued Theranos for $140 million. Investors began suing. Partners pulled out. The board of directors resigned one by one. Forbes revised Holmes' net worth from $4.5 billion to zero. In March 2018, the SEC charged Elizabeth Holmes and Theranos president Sunny Balwani with massive fraud. Holmes settled with the SEC, paying a $500,000 fine, returning shares, and accepting a ban from serving as a director or officer of a public company for 10 years. But the criminal case was just beginning. In June 2018, Holmes and Balwani were indicted on federal wire fraud charges. Prosecutors alleged they had deliberately defrauded investors, doctors, and patients with false claims about the technology. The trial began in September 2021, more than 6 years after Carreyrou's first article. It lasted nearly 4 months. Holmes took the stand in her own defense. She blamed Balwani, who she said was both her business partner and her abuser. She said she believed technology never worked. This is the full story of how one woman fooled investors, patients, and the entire medical industry. Theranos, Elizabeth Holmes, startup fraud, corporate scandal, the fraud files, Silicon Valley, blood test, documentary, tags, Theranos, Elizabeth Holmes, Theranos documentary, startup fraud, Silicon Valley fraud, blood testing, Theranos scandal, John Carreyrou, Tyler Schultz, corporate fraud documentary, the fraud files, Theranos explained, biggest startup fraud, Sunny Balwani,